Yellowstone National Park is one of the most extraordinary places on Earth. It's home to more than half of the world's active geysers and is also the site of America's first national park. But it's also home to something that could change everything: supervolcano. There are only about a dozen known supervolcanoes in the world, and fortunately for those of us living near them, they don't erupt very often. The last eruption was 74,000 years ago, but the next eruption could be tomorrow, or perhaps a few thousand years from now. And when it does, it could affect every single person on the planet. Hi, and welcome to this channel. Today, we're going to do something different. Instead of talking about what happened in a specific year, we're going to talk about something that might happen in the future: an eruption of Yellowstone Supervolcano. It all started with some strange dreams. Or were they dreams? They might have been visions of the future. Henry D. Wallace had them in 1985. He saw rivers of fire pouring out of the earth, destroying everything in their path. At the time, he was driving across Wyoming and stopped at Old Faithful to take a break. That's when his prophetic dreams began. Of course, dreams can mean anything. So Wallace went on his way and forgot about it until 3 months later, when he learned there had been an earthquake swarm near Yellowstone National Park. This meant a bunch of earthquakes happening in the same place, over a short period of time. Scientists monitor these things because earthquake swarms can sometimes indicate that magma is moving underground. In fact, the first recorded earthquake swarm at Yellowstone was in 1859. No one was monitoring it, so the connection wasn't made until decades later. Since then, scientists have recorded 20 different earthquake swarms in the Yellowstone region, including the one that happened while Wallace was having his fiery dreams. All of this led him to write a book called Firestorm on the Mountain in 1997. In it, he described the day the supervolcano would erupt, complete with molten rivers and a worldwide ice age. His prediction for the eruption was based on the Bible, specifically the book of Revelation. Of course, the end of the world isn't something you should base your scientific predictions on. But Wallace wasn't the only one who had a vision of Yellowstone erupting. There was also Ivan T. Sanderson, a famous zoologist. Sanderson visited Yellowstone in 1965 and told everyone he met that the area was overdue for an eruption. Even though scientists believed it would not erupt for thousands more years, Sanderson insisted it would happen soon and predicted it would occur in either 1969 or 1973. Guess what? Nothing happened. To make matters worse, he doubled down on his prediction for the next eruption. After the 1985 earthquake swarm, Sanderson told everyone that the earthquake swarm was a sign that the magma chamber was getting ready to blow. But just because two people predicted that Yellowstone would erupt doesn't mean that it will. There have been many false alarms. After all, in 1985, there was a swarm of earthquakes, but nothing happened. Then in 2018, another swarm of earthquakes struck. Scientists at the U.S. Geological Survey said it was the largest swarm in 2 decades. Again, nothing happened. So what do we really know about the next eruption of the Yellowstone supervolcano? To understand what might happen, we need to go back to the beginning. Yellowstone sits atop a hotspot, a plume of hot magma deep in the Earth's mantle. Hotspots are stationary, but the North American plate moves over it. That means new magma comes up all the time to replace what has cooled. This creates mountain chains as the plate moves along. That's how we got Hawaii. That's also how we got Yellowstone. The great thing about hotspots is that they help us date rocks by using what's called the isochron method. Isochrons are layers of igneous rock, layers of rock created by magma. The older the rock, the further away it is from the hotspot. You can use this to calculate the age of any given rock by measuring how far away it is from the hotspot. Scientists have done this with the Yellowstone caldera, the collapsed crater left behind after the last eruption. They discovered that magma has been accumulating under the area for the past 20 million years. That's right, 20 million years. This means the magma chamber is always being refilled, which brings us back to the present day. How big is the magma chamber? According to the United States Geological Survey, it's roughly 43 by 25 miles and extends as deep as 6 miles into the earth. That's enough magma to fill up the Grand Canyon. And all that magma is sitting just below the surface, less than 10 miles deep. Now, let's talk about what will happen during the next eruption. As mentioned earlier, the last eruption was 74,000 years ago. Back then, magma broke through the Earth's crust and spread out in all directions. It traveled as far as Idaho and Montana. And yes, the magma did solidify, but it solidified into ash. This layer of ash is still around today. In fact, it makes up part of the soil in which crops are grown in Idaho. If the next eruption is anything like the last one, much of the United States could be covered in ash. And this ash would block out the sun, causing a global cooling effect. If it's a bigger eruption, the ash could travel across the entire planet. Either way, the ash would cause widespread crop failure and famine for people around the world. And if that happens, you can bet there will be mass extinctions. The last eruption caused the extinction of several species, including a type of wild dog that lived in the Americas. But even though the eruption affected the entire planet, Yellowstone itself didn't explode all at once. Instead, the magma spilled out in several pulses. Each pulse caused its own earthquake swarm, and each pulse was separated by weeks or months. The second largest eruption at Yellowstone occurred about 1.3 million years ago. That eruption was much more violent and took place over a longer period of time. In fact, it was so big that it was split into two separate events. First, there was a Plinian eruption, the same kind that created Mount Vesuvius in Italy. Then there was a more typical shield volcano eruption. What this means is that no one really knows what to expect from the next eruption. We know it will be huge, but beyond that, all bets are off. So the ash would cause problems for everyone, but there would be other immediate effects as well. During the eruption, toxic gases would be released into the atmosphere. These include sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide, and more. The gases would drift over the Rocky Mountains and reach large populations of livestock. And let's face it, most of the animals wouldn't survive. This raises an interesting question. What would happen to all the dead cows and bison and elk, and deer and sheep and pigs, and chickens and horses, and all the other animals? Well, scientists believe that a massive die-off of wildlife would occur, and then scavengers would move in. Some of the scavengers would die as well, but others would survive and reproduce. Over time, life would begin to return to normal. Plants would grow, animals would scavenge the dead carcasses, and life would continue. Yellowstone would be very different though. A major eruption would likely change the landscape forever. Whole areas could be wiped out and new lakes could be formed. Steam explosions would blast out of the ground and turn the area into a new and even more volatile version of itself. For humans though, the effects would vary. People far from the eruption would likely suffer from the ash and colder temperatures. Those closer to Yellowstone would likely die from the ash, gases, and collapsing infrastructure. Only those within Yellowstone National Park would likely survive. That's because the park has bunkers built for nuclear war. They're filled with supplies and could easily withstand an eruption. In fact, a plan called Operation Alert would likely be put into action. It's a plan for federal executives in case of a nuclear attack. All the executives would be loaded onto planes and flown to the bunkers. And since there are no roads in or out of the park during an eruption, they would likely stay there indefinitely. How long would they stay? That depends on the size of the eruption. If it's anything like the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens, then conditions may become habitable again within a few years. But if it's more like the 1815 eruption of Mount Tambora, then it could take decades for people to return. One thing's for sure though, Yellowstone's next eruption will be unlike anything we've ever seen before. Unlike other volcanoes, it doesn't follow a linear path. It erupts in all directions at once. It's massive, dangerous, and awe-inspiring. And when it blows, we will all feel the effects. Now, check out what really killed the dinosaurs. Or watch this video instead.